Hey there, welcome back to The Truth is Somewhere, a conspiracy theory podcast. And sometimes we cover other things, but I don't actually know today.
You don't
I don't actually know most days.
You don't know most days.
Yeah. So Megan, what are we talking about?
So, a little bit of backstory first. When I was a kid, probably like 6 or 7, my family had this book, and I think it was called Unexplained Mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, very vividly that the cover was, like, this, like, blue marble color, and it had silver lettering.
Mm-hmm.
And it had the word mysteries in it for sure, and I'm pretty sure it had the word unexplained in it, so it was either, like, mysteries of the unexplained or unexplained mysteries, something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, you don't care about what the title of the book was. But it was a book filled with, podcast fodder, essentially. So there was, like, a chapter on Bigfoot, and a whole section on, like, UFOs, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And there was a section that, like, caused all sorts of intrigue for me as a kid.
Like?
I was, like, so obsessed with it, and it was spontaneous human combustion.
Oh boy, I remember that. That was a big thing back in the 90s.
Well, this book was from, like, the 70s. It wasn't, like, a new book when I was a kid in the 90s.
Did you ask your parents if they still had that book?
No, I did not ask my parents if they still had that book.
You should.
Yeah. Anyway, so I remember, like, it piqued my interest a lot when I was a kid, and then we started doing this podcast, and I was like, oh, I really want to talk about spontaneous human combustion, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to put it off, because it's not exactly a conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. But it's enough of an unexplained mystery, and it is something that fascinates me so much that I decided we're just going to go for it, and we're going to talk about it.
Maybe we should change from a conspiracy theory podcast to The Truth is Somewhere, an unexplained mystery and conspiracy theory podcast.
Well, I mean, our description definitely does say that we talk about conspiracy theories and mysteries.
Sure.
So, not everything we've talked about has been strictly conspiracy theory.
Oh, absolutely not.
Now.
So we're talking about people burning alive.
We're talking about people burning alive.
That's lovely.
I know. So spontaneous human combustion occurs when a human seemingly bursts into flames without apparent external ignition. There are hundreds of cases of SHC, and I'll cover a few of them today, but all of them have a similar pattern.
SHC.
That's what it was called in all my research, and it's much easier to say than spontaneous human combustion again and again and again.
Of course it is, but still, I just didn't think that... I guess everything's an acronym.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What did you write?
Can you...
Oh, okay.
I just drew a little dude. That our Patreon viewers can see.
Okay.
He's a little guy on fire.
This shows how much he pays attention to me while I'm talking.
Look, dude on fire. I listened to everything so far.
Dude on fire.
I was talking to you while I was doing this.
That's true. Okay. So all of the cases have a very similar pattern. In the cases, the body is almost completely consumed, usually inside their home, and leaves behind some extremities like lower legs and feet, but the surrounding areas are relatively unharmed by the fire.
Okay.
So before I cover some of the theories of how this can happen, I'm going to talk about some of the more famous cases of it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to jump in.
Okay. When can I ask questions?
At any point, you can ask questions.
Okay. Is there any connection to cigarettes?
In some of them, yes.
Okay.
Not in all, but in some, for sure.
And that would lead me to ask, has the number of spontaneous combustions dropped?
I don't think necessarily, no.
Okay. Because I certainly haven't heard of it in a long time.
Well, there's some that are fairly recent that I'm going to talk about, actually.
Okay.
But there are theories about the whole cigarette thing, and we'll get there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But this one in particular actually does have to do with a cigarette.
Oh, boy.
Okay. This was actually the one that was in the book.
Okay.
From when I was a kid.
Oh, you remember it?
So, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the one that
good way to start.
Initially piqued my interest when I was a little 6-year-old child. Who knew that I was going to do this podcast someday? This book helped form the weird brainwaves that I have now.
I love your weird brainwaves.
I know. Thank you. I love your weird brainwaves too.
Oh, I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but...
Now that you all have gagged yourself with spoons... okay. It's now July 2nd, 1951.
Ooh, back in time.
Back in time. And Pansy Carpenter arrives at the St. Petersburg, Florida apartment she was renting to Mary Reeser. Mm-hmm. She gets there around 8 a.m. And Carpenter noticed that the metal doorknob to the apartment was uncomfortably warm to the touch, and she called the police, as you do. Police found Reeser's remains in a chair in the living room. Only her backbone, part of her left foot, and her skull remained. The rest was all ash.
Oh.
Her skull appeared to have shrunk during the fire. That's slightly contested. So, like, some people say that the Emmy's report says that the skull was small, like smaller than it should have been, and then other people who are like, "This is not a real thing," are like, "No, that's just an old wives' tale. That's just made up to like scare you even more."
Sure.
So, just throwing that out there. Either it was or it was not, but I'm gonna go with the fact that all the official reports claim it was.
Okay, that seems like one of those things, I thought for a moment, like, oh man, I guess I've never really looked into what happens to the bones of a fire, but that's one of those things that if bones shrunk when they were burnt, like if a body was burnt and the bone shrunk, I think that's something, unless it was like, oh, you know, they shrink by millimeters, that would be something that I don't think would get past people. I think that would be something like you would know.
I think part of it is kind of logical.
Yeah, you're dehydrating it, but the problem is
that was what I was thinking.
The problem is these are calcium structures that aren't reliant on water any longer.
It's not like the rest of us.
So that's why I'm saying, like, maybe it shrinks because of a created vacuum that would cause it, or like pressure that is no longer there, causing it to collapse slightly in on itself. But like I said, minuscule would be the case. So a skull shrinking, first off, well,
it wasn't like shrunken skull size, like it was just noticeably smaller than it should have been.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Experts estimated that the fire had to have been at least 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit and would have had to burn for several hours in order to reduce most of the body to ash, which was actually something I started thinking about as I was beginning the research, because I remember back to the episode on the solder children and how no bodies were ever found.
Right.
And how hot fire has to burn in for how long in order to burn a body, because I was like, now wait a minute, if she's ash, like, this was very, very hot fire burning for a very, very long time, and I mean, nothing around her.
Yeah, and we're mostly water, so...
Yeah.
You ever tried to light a leaf on fire? Normally, you'll get it to smoke a little bit, and it'll want to put itself out, because it's mostly water as well. That's why you need good dry wood to start a fire, because, I mean, unless you're dealing with thousands of degrees, it's going to want to put itself out. Same with the human body. You light yourself on fire, more than likely that fire is going to put itself out because you've got enough water on you.
Sure.
You don't put your hand on the stove and light on fire.
Sure,
but if you put a piece of paper on the stove, it'll light on fire.
Yeah. So the only things that were damaged by the fire, obviously other than her, were the chair in which she sat, a lamp and a table next to the chair, and an electrical clock whose plug was melted and had stopped at 4:20 a.m. So people, like, obviously they assumed that's about around the time she died.
She's a pot smoker.
Oh.
she wasn't smoking cigarettes.
Oh, okay.
It was it was the devil's cabbage.
Oh, devil's lettuce.
Cabbage,
sure. Devil's Brussels sprouts.
The devil's Brussels sprouts. It was the devil's green beans.
I just pictured the, like, Jolly Green Giant with horns now. Oh.
It was the bee. Well, it was the 50s, right?
Yeah.
40? It was the bee's knees, devil's green beans.
It's ridiculous. So obviously, the question I start asking them, like, how could a fire burn that hot for that long that it reduces a person to ash?
Yeah.
But it doesn't burn the house down around them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's nuts.
Let alone the chair.
Yeah. Like, the chair was still standing. It was damaged, but she was still in the chair. Which is nuts.
Are there pictures of this?
I think there are, but I don't have any set up to show you.
Okay.
If I can find some afterwards for the show notes,
sure,
we'll do that. Okay. Yeah. So St. Petersburg police sent a box of evidence to the FBI and asked for help with the case. And the FBI eventually concluded that Reeser, who was known to take sleeping pills and had fallen asleep while smoking, had ignited herself with a cigarette. Because that's, like, the only logical explanation you can possibly come to,
of
right?
Course.
So, a frequent consultant of the FBI However, physical anthropologist Wilton M. Krogman disagreed with the FBI's conclusion, and he wrote extensively about the case in the General Magazine and History Chronicle of the University of Pennsylvania. So, peer-reviewed journal, right? Which is really exciting, because most of the time when I'm talking about this stuff, none of it's in a peer-reviewed anything.
Right, it's hearsay.
So this professor writes, quote, "I find it hard to believe that a human body, once ignited, will literally consume itself. Burn itself out as does a candle wick. Never have I seen a body so completely consumed by heat. This is contrary to normal experience, and I regard it as the most amazing thing I have ever seen. As I review it, the short hairs on my neck bristle with vague fear. Were I living in the Middle Ages, I'd mutter something about black magic."
Yeah, I mean, he essentially says what I said before, that a human does not burn out like a candle, because we don't burn like that. Our hair will burn like that. It is dry. It normally has oils on it. It is very combustible. The rest of our body, not so much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always go back to the fact that nothing else was damaged. Or, like, damaged,
just seems
like,
so
burnt
weird.
down.
It seems like the kind of thing where someone wants to cover up some sort of evidence. So, but I don't know how you would burn a body like that.
Not without
and get them
an
into
accelerant.
that place. Yeah. Or even burn them and then put the limbs there.
Yeah, I feel like they would notice something. Like, if it wasn't, like,
I don't
naturally...
know, though. If you think about it, smaller skull, maybe it was a setup.
Maybe.
I don't know if the police ever ran fingerprints on the limbs or...
No, this goes down as one of those great mysteries. This is one of those things where people are just like... the official record shows what the FBI said, that she lit herself on fire with a cigarette and she died.
Hey, we've brought up the mafia a few times.
Right?
I mean, I am not joking about something in that vein where maybe somebody was planted.
Sure.
They They took some ashes, spread it. Maybe they even took human ashes. Maybe they even took her ashes. Her limbs. Skull was not recognizable, or so they took another skull that was too small for her. Right? Who's gonna check the skull when you've got the hands and the feet to check to see if that belongs to somebody? So they spread some ashes there, threw the limbs where they thought they should be, planted some cigarettes, some sleeping pills. And lit the couch on fire, or the chair rather, and the chair put itself out after a while.
So, to be fair,
yeah,
the sleeping pill thing is not a plant, because the reason that they know that she was taking sleeping pills was because her son had been visiting her earlier that day.
All right.
And she had complained that she had already taken one and it didn't work and she was going to take another one. Mm-hmm. So that's why the FBI came to that conclusion, because it's the only logical conclusion
I'm not saying that.
Not that I don't love your conspiracy-mindedness right now.
I'm not saying that, sure, whether or not the sleeping pills were a plant or not, it's still a point to think about.
Sure. It is a point to think about. It is not something that had been brought up in any of the research I saw, and it's not something I had thought about. But you're right. There could be foul play afoot.
Conspiracy against conspiracy.
Yeah. Fact.
There was actually 2 feet left and 2 hands, not just a foot.
And they only planted one.
Okay. Only 1 foot?
Yeah, I think it was only one.
Oh, okay. Her other foot didn't make it?
Only her backbone, a part of her left foot, and her skull.
Oh, conspiracy afoot.
Conspiracy a foot, not conspiracy feet.
You said it, I'm just saying what you said. You're not realizing the connection I made a long time ago.
I totally get it now. I'm just like, that's ridiculous. No, that's not what I was trying to
I know.
allude to, but I like it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next guy.
Okay.
Next person. On December 22nd, 2010, in Ballybane, Galway, Ireland, Tom Mannion was awoken at 3 a.m. by his fire alarm. Mannion saw heavy smoke coming from his 76-year-old neighbor's house. Mannion banged on the neighbor's door, but when he got no response, he called the fire department. Once the fire had been extinguished, the scene was inspected by Gerard O'Callaghan, who found the remains of 76-year-old Michael Faherty. I mean, this is, like, as Irish as it gets.
Faherty?
Yeah, it's like Gerard O'Callaghan and Michael Faherty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Faraday had been lying on his back in a small sitting room, and his head was close to an open fireplace. His body was almost entirely destroyed by the fire that centered entirely on him. The only damage, other than smoke damage, was to the floor and ceiling directly above and below Faraday's body. Police determined that no one had entered or left the house since the last time Faraday had been seen alive, so murder was ruled out.
Okay.
And it was also ruled that the fire in the fireplace was not the cause of the body's fire, and no accelerants were found in any of the debris.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Weird, right?
Yeah. What year did you say this was?
2010.
Ooh, 2010. That's, 9 years ago.
Yeah. But not
That's
that long.
Almost a decade.
Almost a decade. But I told you I would give you some more recent stuff, and I did.
All right.
I found recent stuff.
So,
What's
dude,
really
close to the
interesting
fireplace.
is that all of the recent stuff
Mm-hmm.
seemed to come from the UK.
Oh.
Like, almost all of it. Some of it didn't, but, like, everything I read was, like, Ireland, England, Ireland. And I wonder,
Wow.
now that you've brought up the smoking thing, I think smoking's still more prevalent in the
Mhm.
UK than it is in America.
I don't know. But that might be an interesting little
tidbit to look into. Yeah, anyway.
Still seems pretty crazy that your body would burn up like that from a
I know,
cigarette.
it's crazy.
But,
or
I
from
mean,
an ember from the fireplace in this case,
Yeah,
would be the theory.
Sure. But, worst case scenario, I guess, maybe? I don't know. I'm not a
You're, like,
fire
the wood
expert.
pops and an ember comes and
Sure, I
floats
get
down.
the ember.
Maybe you were drunk and you're passed out by the fireplace and an ember lands on your chest and next thing you know you're on fire.
You just spilt 151 all over yourself.
There was no accelerant.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I don't
So,
know.
not that.
Still, your clothes would burn.
Yeah.
And that'd pretty much be it.
We'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna drop some science on you later.
Ooh, you're gonna handle the science
I
this
was
time,
actually, like, wondering if you knew this, because I had this thought where I was like, God, Corey watches, like, so many scientific YouTube channels that I just know that he's probably seen something like this, and I'm doing all this research, and he's just gonna be like, oh no, and debunk the first one out the gate, and then I'm gonna have nothing else to talk about. But I'm so excited that I get to drop some science on you!
Okay.
Woo!
Right. Yay.
Sorry about your ears. I got real excited.
That's fine, I'll fix it in post-editing.
There was enough left of Faraday, though. One lung and a trachea to perform some tests, and
Okay.
it was found that there was no soot in the lung or trachea, meaning that Faraday must have died before or right after the fire started. Which definitely leads you to think, like, foul play, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And there was no damage to the lung that indicated a heart attack, so it's not like he died of natural causes and then possibly an ember popped over and...
So it seems like someone killed him and lit him on fire.
But murder was ruled out because nobody had entered the house since the last time Faraday had been seen.
I guess that's what they saw.
So
How do they know that, though?
I don't.
100%.
I don't know. They just said that nobody had.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess the whole ember thing is the best thing that we have on this situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what we think. But in 2011, the coroner, Dr. McLaughlin, again, the most Irish that this gets.
Yes.
O'Callaghan, Faraday, McLaughlin. He had this to say in his official report, quote, "The fire was thoroughly investigated, and I'm left with the conclusion that this fits into the category of spontaneous human combustion, for which there is no adequate explanation."
Okay.
Boom, the coroner was like, don't get it. Spontaneous human combustion.
Isn't this kind of weird? Has anyone ever seen spontaneous human combustion?
So apparently there was this guy in, like, New York or something fairly recently who was walking down the street and just burst into flames. But I think that they ruled that was a cigar or a cigarette or something like that, but he, like, violently burst into flames.
Did he
Just
die?
No. The people were able to put him out.
Oh.
Because people were on the street and saw it happen. He just
Okay.
was, like, suddenly on fire.
I guess, as a kid, I always imagined it was, like, from inside.
Mm-hmm.
That you, like, your insides got super hot and you started burning. I don't know.
That is a theory.
Yeah, I mean, the most combustible thing on you is your surface, though. So, because your insides are all squishy and wet. So maybe your insides get so hot that your outsides light on fire, but the problem is you'd be boiling already.
Yeah, you'd already be... Well, which
You'd be
could
dead.
explain why that guy died before the fire
But they
started.
would... That's true. I don't know. So, not enough
Not enough information.
Not enough information because, like, can they say that his veins, his veins look like they had been
No,
cooked?
there wasn't enough left of him.
Okay.
All that was left was a little piece of lung and a trachea.
Yeah. No foot?
No foot. Enough to know that there was no signs of heart attack and no soot inside.
Mm-hmm.
So he was dead already.
Mafia.
Sure. It really is just this big, like, conspiracy that the mafia is like, we use this and they don't know how to explain it and we like it.
It's the Illuminati. It's the lizard people breathing fire.
Dragon people.
People see them and think lizard people, but really they're
dragon
people.
That makes so much sense. Why didn't I think of it sooner?
It's just, duh. What were we thinking? They
So
are
our stupid logical brains.
dragon people shooting fire
Mm-hmm.
and burning them, and people are like, "Well, it doesn't make any sense," you know?
Because it doesn't.
Because it doesn't. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
The Illuminati is not lizard people. They are indeed dragon people.
And the causes of spontaneous human combustion.
Yeah. Not so
I mean, we might as well quit right now.
I mean, one of us might actually be... Oh, no. Maybe we shouldn't have found this out. Spread the word. They can't kill us all.
Okay. Another more recent one. Mm-hmm.
How recent?
February 18th, 2013.
Ooh. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Members of Danny Van Zant's family entered his home in Muldrow, Oklahoma, to find his incinerated remains. There was no damage to the surrounding objects in the home, and no signs of a break-in, struggle, or other cause of death.
Okay.
The coroner ruled that Van Zant had died before the fire because of the lack of soot in the airway. The prevailing theory is that Danny died and landed on a lit cigarette. But the Sequoia County Sheriff, Ron Lockhart, who had over 40 years of arson investigation experience at that time, alluded to the idea that spontaneous human combustion as the cause of Van Zant's fire.
Uh-huh.
And I have this really great quote from Lockhart that I have to read.
Oh, please.
Because Oklahoma.
Uh-huh.
Quote, "We wasn't saying the guy just busted into flames. You know, there's gotta have an ignition source, and that's what we're looking at is an ignition source, such as lighting a cigarette and catches himself on fire, sucks the flames down his throat, and falls down."
Oh.
They wasn't saying that the guy busted into flames.
It wasn't at all.
They wasn't saying. We wasn't saying. Wasn't me. No way.
No way.
No way.
Uh...
Mr. Firehands.
Who's this guy think he is? Mr.
Busted into flames.
No way.
Wait, no way.
Not my fire.
Not my problem. That's what I always say.
No way.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Whew, moving on. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to talk about what spontaneous human combustion could be.
Oh,
science-wise.
okay. Other than lizards.
Other than dragons. Yes.
Yeah, dragons.
Other than Illuminati dragons.
Illuminating dragons.
Illuminating dragons.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a widespread belief that the fire is sparked when methane builds up in the intestines and it is ignited by enzymes. So that's your idea of from inside out, right?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is cows.
Don't ignite, yeah.
Don't ignite, and cows produce way more methane than we do.
Oh, absolutely.
Way more. So
they have different enzymes as well, though.
Well, that's true. That's fair. So it could be that our methane is building up too much and it's igniting enzymes are igniting it inside of our guts.
Okay,
which is kind of terrifying if you think about it.
Yeah, but
take your Beano. That's all I have to say.
But I don't think that's what it is.
That's a very widespread belief, though.
Uh-huh.
Another theory is that the fire begins because static electricity builds up inside the body. One theorist who claims to be an expert on SHC claims that there is a new subatomic particle called a pyroton.
Uh-huh.
I knew. Which he says interacts with cells to create a mini explosion. Obviously, there's no scientific evidence that pyrotons actually exist.
Yeah.
And the most plausible explanation, here we go. Here's where I drop the science on you.
Okay.
The most plausible explanation is the wick effect.
Okay.
So, when lit by some outside source of ignition, the human body essentially acts like an inside-out candle. Candles have a wick surrounded by a wax made of flammable fats.
Sure.
Uh-huh. The human body is made of flammable fats, and the clothing acts as a wick. So when the clothing is ignited, the fat melts and soaks into the clothing and keeps the wick burning slowly.
So the clothes don't burn, the fat burns. Because that's essentially how a candle works, is that in place of the wick burning, the fats burn. The wick does still burn, just at a very slow rate.
Yeah, so because initially your wick catches on fire, your clothing catches on fire, and then your fat melts and it soaks the rest of your clothing, and then it just keeps burning.
So does this happen more to obese people?
That was the interesting thing, is that I didn't see anything about any of those people being obese, but I would assume that it is more likely to happen to people who have more fats to burn. But that also explains why it burns itself out and nothing else is damaged, because it's specifically focused on the fats of the human body, and once the fats are gone, it has nothing to burn anymore.
I don't agree. I think that if someone was sitting in a chair, the dry fabrics would burn as well. Same with the carpet. Carpet would burn. I think that is the scientific good
explanation.
But I think that unless you're wearing, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. Because so maybe some of our listeners know and have looked into this a little further. Mm-hmm. Has there been any research on the clothing that people have worn? Because in today's world, more and more people are wearing synthetic materials. And synthetic materials don't burn the same way. Mm-hmm. They melt. Exactly. So would that mean that someone would not... If we all change to synthetic clothing, is spontaneous combustion going to disappear? I mean, obviously don't do that. Synthetic clothing is... I mean, it's its own thing, and I don't even want to touch on that. But anyways... like, firefighters and other people in that... And those fields and fields that may potentially deal with fires are specifically told not to wear synthetic clothing.
Fabrics, yeah.
Because it will stick to you and do far more damage than a cotton shirt that will burn off of you. That's what is confusing to me, because we have no records of human wicks at any...
Well, but we do have scientific evidence that the wick effect is real.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump to that.
Okay.
So there was a forensic scientist, his name is John DeHaan, and he conducted an experiment on a pig corpse. Mm-hmm. So he wraps it in a blanket, lights the blanket on fire.
Okay.
Pig fat melts, leaves behind only the pig's feet, pretty much. Everything else becomes ash, and everything around it, not really damaged.
Interesting. Okay.
So there's proof that the wick effect is real. Whether or not it's real on humans, like, nobody's gonna do that, right? But, I mean, I guess if you donated your body to science, that's what you're gonna do. When I die, donate my body to spontaneous human combustion research.
You'll be, you'll be cremated, at least.
No, that's true.
So, why not?
So I won't be taking up Earth space that I don't need to be taken up.
Right. So, I don't know. I think that's definitely probable. I think that maybe, if that is true, and that is how it happens, it's a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Which
is why it's rare. It's only hundreds of cases in the known history of man, right?
And I think that makes some sense. I have a hard time believing that it won't light other things on fire. Mm-hmm. I think in some cases that would make sense. But I feel like odds are, I mean, if you knock a candle over, it doesn't say, I'm only burning this
wick.
It says, I'm going to burn whatever I touch. And it just seems really odd to me that the fire would stop right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with that, spontaneous human combustion has never been scientifically proven or disproven.
Okay.
There are some objects that have been scientifically proven to burst into flames without an outside heat source. For instance, oily rags stored together in a bucket will slowly raise in temperature from the air hitting them, and will eventually get hot enough to ignite the flammable oils.
It's true, yeah.
And wet piles of hay and straw will also spontaneously combust when microbes and bacteria living inside the piles generate enough heat to kindle a spark.
Yeah, a lot of places have a lot of actually trash compactors in particular. There was something, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago where they started telling people, like, no, you can't bring your compost. If you're going to throw stuff away...
Yeah, because compost will cause fires.
Compost, because of the microbes, yeah, it'll get so hot that it will eventually start a fire. So, yeah, absolutely true. So,
but because there's the scientific proof of other things spontaneously combusting, and we don't have an explanation for the fact that we don't have a good explanation for the fact that people are burning and nothing else is burning, which is what you're hung up on, right? Is that nothing else is burning?
Yeah.
Keeps the mystery alive.
I guess.
Keeps this, an interesting mystery conspiracy podcast fodder subject.
Sure.
That's what I got.
That's what you got. All right. Well, we gotta keep the fire going, so why don't you tell people how they can continue to listen to us and what the perks are and all that good stuff.
All right, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at TTIS Podcast. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you just want to say hi, you can email us at thetruthissomewherepodcast@gmail.com. Join our closed Facebook group. It's TTIS Podcast Group. Just type it in on Facebook. Facebook's stupid. It's going to ask you if you meant this podcast group. You didn't mean that. You meant TTIS Podcast Group, but we will show up. I promise. There are people in there. You can interact directly with Corey and I. Pretty cool. If you like what we're doing, you can jump on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Those help other people find us. Puts us up in the charts. Because iTunes algorithms are stupid.
Yep.
And if you really like what we're doing, you can hop on over to Patreon. You can get silly videos. Sometimes Corey starts them before I realize, so I make funny noises and faces.
I always start them before we start recording.
Before I realize. And anyway, you can see videos. You can, depending on the tier that you choose, you can get cool merch. Speaking of merch, if you just want to buy cool merch, you can jump over to The Truth Is Somewhere. TheTruthIsSomewhere.threadless.com. Show notes, as always, TheTruthIsSomewhere.com. That is absolutely everything I have for you. The truth is somewhere, guys. Keep looking.
We didn't start the fire.
It was always...